Hey, Black Belt reads March recap. So March was pretty good. I think I have 10 books here. So 10 books in a month is pretty good. That's probably about average for me. So I've got 4 graphic novels. I've got 3 horror novels, 1 sci-fi, 1 fantasy, and 1 classic. So that's usually how I do things. If you've never seen my videos, I try to do a little bit of everything. I like all genres for the most part, so I try to throw in a classic, a sci-fi, a fantasy, and a horror like every month. But also, I just kind of go wherever my mood takes me. So that's why I have 3 horror books, because this month I was just feeling the horror vibe more. But we'll start with the first horror novel that I read this month. Tender is the Flesh. I told myself I wasn't going to read this because I don't always like to read the hot trending books, but dang it, man, I just kept seeing it everywhere. And I saw it at the store, and it's so thin. I'm like, I can read that in just a couple days, which I did. So decided to see what it was all about. I knew it was about cannibalism, and yes, of course it was. I did enjoy it. It definitely is not going to be anywhere in my top favorites, of the year or even the month. But, I'm glad I read it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It was just very cold, very dry writing. Maybe that's due to the translation. Maybe that's just sort of the Argentinian style. Maybe it's intentional because the book is very bleak. This is like one of the most bleak books I've ever read. I mean, don't read this if you don't want to be just depressed. But I will say the ending of the book was very surprising to me. Like the last page, I had no idea that's what was about to happen. And I was so mad, but in a good way where you're like, oh, I'm so mad at the book, at the characters in this book. But yeah, I mean, this is a quick read. You can read it in just a couple sittings, and it's got like short chapters, you know. So it's one of those books. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Tender is the Flesh. So put it right there. I would probably have read more books this month if it weren't for this behemoth right here that I'm currently working on. It's like almost 900 pages. Anyway, the next one I have here, Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. So, sort of a controversial author. Some people seem to either love him or hate him. I read The Only Good Indians when it came out. I think it's 2020. I absolutely loved it. One of my favorite books I read that year. Yeah, so I wanted to read more Stephen Graham Jones. This is my third Jones book, and I was drawn to this because vampire books are like everywhere, It's definitely not a challenge to find a vampire book. They're like wolf scat. You're just always trying not to step in it. Werewolf books, on the other hand, I didn't really have any in my collection. Um, and then I realized that he wrote a werewolf book, and I thought, perfect. I want to read more of his books, and he's got a werewolf book. So here, this month in March, we had that crazy blood moon. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. It was the huge red moon in the sky. My daughter was actually born on that day. She was born on the blood moon. So who knows? Maybe she's got a little bit of that wolf blood in her. Uh, it was really cool. It was hailing that day. It was like 30-mile-per-hour winds. It was wild. So she was born on a blood moon in a storm. Anyway, Mongrels. Very good. Really liked this one. Not maybe as much as The Only Good Indians, but what I really like about this novel is he just takes the werewolf lore and just makes it his own. Does his own thing with it. Poor, Native American family that just has to keep roaming Southern America because werewolves, they gotta just keep moving. Uh, it's funny, I read it because of the blood moon, and everything. But he talks about how the moon is bullshit, and it's just kind of funny to me. He talks about the transformation when people transform into these wolves and the side effects and everything. Very interesting, really cool. I really like what he did with all that. Um, Funny enough, he's got a vampire book that just came out that I'm really excited to read. So if you're looking for a werewolf book, this is it, man. This is highly, highly recommended. But keep in mind, he's got a very unique style of writing that can be a little hard to follow sometimes. He said it comes from hearing his grandfather tell him stories when he was a kid, and that's just sort of a Native American Indian tradition. So that's why he adopted that writing style. I really like it. It can be a little bit hard to follow at times, but overall, really enjoyed. This is like a 4 out of 5 star book for me. Okay, so the next two, um, got one sci-fi and one horror, but they're both kind of like slash thrillers. Now, I'm not a big thriller guy. For some reason, I keep trying to read thrillers, and they're kind of like enjoyable in the moment, and then immediately I wish I had read something different. First one is kind of in that vein. Riley Sager, Home Before Dark. I've read a Riley Sager book before. I didn't really like it. I'm just not a big thriller. It just feels like there's not a lot of substance there, and it's just like cheap. I just feel kind of like gross after I've read it. Like I wish I would have read something better. This was sort of recommended to me as a horror novel, but it was definitely more of a horror thriller. There were horror elements. It kind of takes place in a haunted house. I didn't hate it. I liked it better than the first novel that I read from Riley Sager, but I think 2 books is enough. I don't think I'll pick up any more of his books. Just not the biggest thriller guy. But I do love haunted houses, so that's why I decided to give him a second chance here. And it does the thing with the haunted house that I don't really like. Uh, Minor, I won't say anything because it'd be pretty much a spoiler if I say much more. If you like thrillers and you're just looking for an easy read, then this is it. Sometimes after reading a challenging book, like last month when I read those French novels, I just kind of wanted an easier time this month. So that's why you're seeing easier novels. Yeah, it was okay. Okay, so like I said, the next one, sci-fi slash thriller, in my opinion. But I liked this one a lot more. Maybe the sci-fi thriller worked better for me. Maybe it was the writing, maybe it was the story, um, but it definitely worked more in my favor. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Another one that was recommended to me by a bunch of people. It's been on the list forever. Now, the reason I read this one is because sometimes I'll tell my son, hey, go in there, go into the room, this library here. I have like almost 1,000 books in here. I'm like, go in there, just pick something off the shelf. I don't care what it is. Pick whatever you want that looks cool, and I'll read it. And this is what he picked. So that's kind of a fun way to force myself to read something that I might not have picked up otherwise, which, I probably would not have picked this one up, even though I've had it on my shelf for years. But yeah, he picked it, so I read it. It was a very quick read. Again, I could read this in just a couple of days. It's got kind of like short chapters, very easy to follow writing, even though there's some big, big ideas going on in this book. This is like multiverse. What happens, that theory that every choice we make in this life branches off into another life, and there's potentially all these worlds where every choice you've made exists. If I woke up today and decided to go for a run, or I decided to go drink beer and get drunk at 10 a.m., or like those choices branch off and become different people. It's just interesting to me. That's why I love sci-fi, right? And this was done really well. So this person is kind of thrown into this horrifying experience where he's faced with these decisions he has to make and alternate versions of himself. And it's really, really interesting. Yeah, kind of like a thriller, though, because, we got murder and sort of like betrayal and uh, apocalyptic sci-fi. All these things are really interesting. Yeah, this is only my second Blake Crouch book. I really enjoyed it. I have his other book, Recursion, I think, that came out after this, so I will probably read that at some points. I don't know when, but who knows. Why did my son pick this? I don't know. Maybe it just looked cool on the shelf to him. Anyway, Blake Crouch, Dark Matter. Okay, so my one fantasy book, Cradle. I'm continuing to read Cradle. It is uncrowned. 5 stars. Absolutely 5 stars. Cradle is like my favorite thing in the world right now. I don't really know why it's not more popular. It's so good. You can get them digitally for like dollars or even free. So good. I mean, it's like crack. Reading these books is like you can't stop. Every time I finish a book, I want to read the next one. This is like book 7 or 8. I think there's 12 total. I'm already reading the next one. Man, Cradle is just so fun. It is like if you just want to have fun reading, Cradle is it. I cannot stop reading it. My eyes just keep going, 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 going. It's like put the book down, man. I got to go to sleep, but I just want to keep reading, keep reading, keep reading. And reading something on my phone, like on the Kindle app, is perfect for when I have my baby. I'm holding her and she's sleeping, and I can just kind of sneak my phone in my pocket while I'm holding her and just read Cradle. She wakes up, bam, take the phone, put it down. Very easy. A little easier than like holding a book with 2 hands. So, anyway, I'm sure a lot of you guys have babies out there. Let me know. I don't really like reading on my phone, but I gotta admit, it makes it pretty nice whenever you're, doing something like that. Also in the dark. I don't want to turn the light on and wake her up. So I'm reading in the dark, but my phone is backlit, so you don't have to have a light on or anything. Anyway, Cradle, man. Will White. I wish he was more popular. Maybe Cradle's more popular than I think, but I don't ever hear anybody talk about it. And it's honestly one of the best fantasy series that I've ever read. Not that I've read a ton of them, but Cradle. All right, so after this last novel, I'll get into the graphic novels. But the classic that I read this month was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. So I like to pick up a classic every month or every couple of months, and sometimes I'll pick more of like a children's classic, and I will read it out loud to my kids. It's tough, they don't want to sit there and just listen to me read. So I'll read a little bit to them. I'll read a little bit to myself. My youngest son is only 4. He doesn't really seem to know what's going on. Like he's not paying attention. So, but yeah, I actually really enjoyed this. I hadn't read it since I was a little kid, or maybe in high school or something. But I didn't remember how dark the book was. It's actually really dark. It's got some very violent, dark stuff going on. Of course, the language is very old, and unfortunately, there's lots of n bombs and stuff in the book. But take take that away, attribute it to its time, I guess. The book itself was really magical, really fun. Um, Made me feel like a kid again, for sure. So, yeah, Mark Twain. All right, I did a whole video about Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. This was a very fun horror graphic novel, cutesy art, but in a very dark theme, very bloody, violent, sort of contrasted by this beautiful, sort of childish, cartoony art style. Really good. Highly recommend. You can read this in just one sitting easily. You can read it digitally. This was this guy's first graphic novel that he published, so excited to see what he'll do after this. And I also talked about the Hellboy Library Edition. This was one of my favorite things I read this month. I'm very excited to read some more Hellboy. And these library editions are absolutely beautiful. They look great on the shelf. And their binding is very, very well done as well. It lays open beautifully. The binding is perfect. You don't get any kind of loss of the art, none of the gutter loss or anything. The art, very dark, very, very good read. Hellboy. Okay, last book. Trying to kind of rush through this because I know my videos, I tend to ramble. Um, the reason I mentioned Hellboy's binding is because my next book is gigantic. Seven to Eternity by Rick Remender and Jerome Opeña. Okay, first of all, the art in this book is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, this book is worth it alone just for the art. The art is fantastic. Absolutely gorgeous. I'll crack it open a little bit here, but it's hard to even pick a spot here. Like, the art is just absolutely fantastic. That being said, all right, check it out. The binding. So this is a huge book. The binding, you hear it cracking and creaking. I mean, it's been doing that the whole time I'm reading it. So it looks great. I love that, but I mean, it's like a mousetrap. This thing, it just wants to close on me every time I'm reading it. It's hard to stay open. It's doing this now because I'm right in the middle of the book. But like, look here at the front, I'm reading. It's actually doing a little bit better now that I kind of broke it in and read it once. Now this would really benefit from a reread as well. But man, this was a cumbersome book to handle while I was reading it. The story. The story was hard for me to follow a little bit. It seemed like the pacing, like he was moving very fast, and I felt like I was like, nipping at his heels, trying to catch up to where he was getting to. By the time I got to the end of the book, I really loved the story, really loved it. This would really benefit from a reread because the first half of the book, I was kind of struggling with all the characters and this new world, and it was moving very fast. Toward the end of the book, I did not want it to stop. I wish this was like 20 issues. I think it's 17 issues. And this book was so fun. Beautiful art, really fun story. There's a part at the end of the book here where a character says seven to eternity. And I just stared at the page with my jaw open. Like, I could not believe that that's what it meant. That's where it was going. Uh, yeah, blew me away. I mean, I was so sucked into the story by the end. I really didn't want it to end. There's a lot of covers at the end of the book. There's a lot of sketches. I mean, the alternate covers are beautiful. Try to showcase some of them here. Yeah. So, pretty much the whole book is done by Jerome Opeña, other than a couple of issues. And even those couple of issues by James Heron were fine. They were fine. It didn't take me away from the story at all. His art style is much different, but it was fine. But Jerome Opeña, I mean, dude has some absolutely fantastic art style. The coloring by Matt Hollingsworth and everything. Here's just a little peek again at the art. Absolutely gorgeous. Some of the big, explosive, colorful scenes in the book are. I just sat there and stared at them. All right, Seven to Eternity. Highly recommend it. Also, Image does such an amazing job with these huge books, and $60. I think I got this thing for like 70% off. I mean, it was like under $20 for this gorgeous, amazing book. So thank you, Image, for keeping the price low. I mean, that is absolutely beautiful on the shelf. All right, that's the month. We're at like 20 minutes now, so if you're still here, I appreciate that. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these, what your thoughts. I don't think I missed anything. I may have got a graphic novel or something that I forgot to talk about. But yeah, if you like this, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I appreciate you. See ya.